Bickering. Councillors, we've got a couple of start items. We're all here, which is great. We've got Councillor Caldwell visiting and Councillor Tozer visiting. So the start items at the moment are 3 confirmation of minutes, 5.1, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. Would anybody like to unstar any items? Councillor Tozer.
I had a question and some seekings of advice about 6.3, as possible.
Yep, okay, so we'll unstar 6.3. Would anybody like to move the remaining start items? Councillor Young and seconded by Councillor Gates. So that is 3, 5.1, 6.1 and 6.2. So I'll take the vote. All in favour? Passed, thank you, carried. And I'll just interrupt to let Jackie know that we've just carried 6.1 and 6.2. Councillors, the next item is conflicts of interest declarations. We have one this morning for Councillor Gates in regards to item 7.2, so we'll deal with that now. Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chairman. Within the body of the report, which is confidential, it mentions an agent appointed by council, a sales agent in Colliers. And in 2016, I accepted a $1,250 donation from Colliers. I'm seeking to remain in the room due to the strategic significance of the proposed sale and confirm that I've had no contact with Colliers International during the current term of council.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, would anybody like to move a procedural motion in regards to Councillor Gates staying in the room? Councillor Pauline Young.
I'd like to move that Councillor Gates may participate in the decision despite the councillor's conflict of interest because of her wealth of knowledge when it comes to the matter being discussed, and it would be a benefit to the whole of the community.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody like to second that?
To be able to participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Through you to Councillor Young, I was just wondering if something about the remoteness of an agent to actually the decision, whether we would also include that, because that for me is more of the reason rather than her knowledge, is that, you know, an agent. So the remoteness of the benefit.
The remoteness of the nexus between the said mentioned real estate firm and council.
It's not like they're.
So, Pauline, did you want to provide some words? Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
The nexus was what she said.
The nexus, yeah.
Did you have a look at this last night?
Yep. Yeah.
The side.
Right. Yeah.
I had no idea it was until this report.
Council Gates want to participate in the decision to sign the council's conference because of the remoteness of the nexus of any potential conflict between content and the matter being discussed. Just, and you could say, take out the wealth, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm happy to move that. Are you okay with
Councillor
that, Chair?
Patterson? Yep.
Second,
you.
councillor Patterson.
Would anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll take the vote and call the division.
Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Hemmel, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Batten Lumsden, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Young and Councillor McDonald.
Okay, thank you. So councillors, that moves us down the list to 7.1, which is in regards to the electrical installation repair. Sorry, it does move us down the list to 6.3. Councillor Tozer.
Thank you, Councillor Owen Jones. I read the report and having been a member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors for some time now, just a general normal member, so there's no conflict involved. They actually recommend that because of the changing legislative environment, that the course be done once, but then there's refresher courses that come up in a matter. So one suggestion I wanted whether the committee would support is that rather than the course being allocated once only during the tenure as an elected representative, because of the changing legislative environment, maybe it should be once each term, or no more than once each term, which is once every 4 years, given the changes that come up from time to time to the Corporations Act and all the relevant legislation.
To Councillor Tozer, what's the recommended update? Is there a recommended timing for the update?
So the ARCD recommend every 2 years. I think that in our environment, that's probably too often, and I don't know if councillors would take that up anyway, but...
Is there a difference between an update and doing the course again?
Correct.
And do you know what the cost of doing the update is?
My recollection, the last time I saw that, was about half as much.
Yeah.
I didn't want to throw a cat amongst pigeons, but some of our colleagues have served for many, many years, and some people might choose to serve for many years, depending on how the community responds to their election campaigns. And I think it actually makes some pragmatic sense for us to at least have this, if this is the way the council wants to go, maybe one in each election cycle might be.
And so I think it needs to be a separate line.
And it makes no sense for the person to do the whole course if they've completed the course, but
Yeah.
I think it is appropriate and practical to make sure that we are refreshed on our obligations under whatever relevant legislation
Yeah,
affects us.
okay. So I think if we were to add that, we should do it as a separate line. Councillor Patterson, did you have your hand up?
No, thank you.
You can play this.
I think if you change the word "the Australian Institute of Company Directors," so we change it to "a Australian Institute Directors course" once per term during their tenure, that'll actually those two. Yeah. So if it was complete an Australian Institute of Company Directors course once per term during their tenure as elected representative, to me that actually gives effective weight to whether it's the main course or a refresher course, and it effectively says, well, this company directors course is the course that the council has nominated be the professional development mechanism for councillors. And they've, as I understand it, tailored a program to us that we're undertaking in February to do this exact thing.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, and I agree with Councillor Tozer that once you've done the course, I did the program 10 years ago, that there is a need for a refresher. I thought that there was ability under our expenses policy if we do want to do other kind of training and support, because it may be that people need them at different times and depending on what they're doing. Once per term, I think seems, maybe it's just that it's available once per term. To me, it seems like it may be a bit much So I was just curious, I suppose, whether those refresher courses would actually already be covered under the general expenses policy that we could request ourselves.
In my experience, when council resolves something quite categorically, officers tend to interpret that quite specifically.
Yep, so we
And
might
that-
be,
I have had some
we might be.
very
spec-
personal
we might-
experience with that.
So councillor Tozer, we might be specific in our change. Councillor Gates?
I was simply going to suggest that in line with what councillor Patterson is suggesting, we could add a 2 that says that a refresher course could be funded via the councillor's expenses reimbursement funds. I mean, I get that it would need to be in the policy, but how frequently a refresher course might be necessary, I don't know anything about the course, so but I would imagine that if someone wanted to do it, and they wanted to pay for it out of their cash advance, they should. We need to have it within the policy. So maybe there's some words that can be developed around that.
Councillor Patterson?
So just so that people are aware, members' cost for a refresher course is $2,500. It's a 2-day program. The other thing about it is because we're coming in, for AICD you don't normally do as a group, but because there's 12 people who want to do it, they're coming in here. Refresher course would more likely be individuals go off and go, okay, the timing's right for me, I'll go and do it. So $2,500.
That wording's no good that's there anyway,
Yeah.
because I can't say that could be funded. It needs to be concise. If there's a level of agreement that that's the only mechanism for funding a refresher course, and rather than providing an opportunity for every 4 years, that
Yep, councillor Tozer?
So there is already a budget line item for professional development and conferences and
I think
such
we can
things. So I think actually that's the budget needs to come out of. I don't think it should be out of the, the allocation that is effectively us
So-
ducking out to community events and supporting charitable activities and.
Councillor Tozer, it's actually dealt with by the policy in regards to expenses reimbursement and resources.
Okay.
So whether or not it's local area works or city funding, it's dealing with the policy to allow effectively councillors who have completed the course once to do a refresher course at a later date.
So through you, Mr Chair, councillors, the only thing I'd suggest in number 2 there is that we would probably want to put some timing around it. So we've just updated it to put the correct name, which is the update course, because I think they're 2 very separate courses.
And
The refresher is called the Company Director's Course Update. That's
So the actual name for the refresher course is the Company Director's Course Update. So that's the actual name.
So could I suggest this, rather than the current 2 as it's written, could we mimic the words in 1, bring that down to 2, and reflect that the 2 is about the update? So Alicia, could you maybe provide some assistance to that? Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, just through you to the director, in terms of that comment on making it specific to the wording, I think it's probably best you don't, because they've got the refresher course, then they've also got reading financial reports course. So someone might do it and think, I really need work, I just want to do the financial reports refresh part, or the governance, there may be bits. So rather than making it prescriptive and...
Or do you just want to say updates? Because all of them are updates to that original. Because then that would, like you say, cover the.
Professional development is important for councillors. Council appears to be of a mind that the Institute of Company Directors is the right organisation to provide that. I don't think we should be too constrained on what we engage, as long as there's some discretion around how often it happens. So that's the way I raised it. I don't actually mind how it comes out. And I'm not on this committee, so you can work out whatever you like.
And here we are helping you regardless, you know, so we're going to land there. We're going to land there. So it doesn't mean anything that you're not on the committee, so.
I actually would have agreed with councillor Gates where you said that any councillor director's update course, so that would cover your governance and that would cover your financial, and that number 2 was very simple, but change the to any. Because any update courses are going to be either financial or
no, so I don't actually think we need the ones per term only. Rightio, here we are. We've all arrived at the place we want to arrive. Councillor Patterson, would you like to move that for us? Councillor Tozer, let's get on the road. So Councillor Patterson, you're happy to move. Would somebody like to second that? Councillor Hamill, thank you. Councillor Patterson, do you need to speak to it?
Councillors come in and find themselves on the largest board on the Gold Coast, and it's really important that we have skills and equipped to do our job properly. So this provides foundations in what we need to do that job.
Outstanding. Councillors, nobody wants to speak against that. I'll take that as closed. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we've got 2 items that are enclosed. So let's deal with the first one first, which is 7.1. Are there any questions that councillors may have that would require us to move into closed? Does anybody have any questions in regards to 7.1? Excellent. Would anybody like to move 7.1? Moved Councillor Gates. Would anybody like to second? Seconded Councillor Pauline Young. Councillor Gates, would you, any comments? Right. Moved. Councillors all in favour? Carried. Councillors, the next item is, what is it? No. Sandy's looking nervous. It's going to be okay. So 7.2, don't go anywhere, Sandy. 7.2, the proposed sale of the Surfers Paradise Transit Centre and Bruce Bishop Car Park. Councillors, clearly the report presented to us is on grey papers, and I'm okay to go into closed should we have any particular questions, but if we can stay in open for as long as possible, let's give that a go. So in regards to the confidentiality, I would suggest that the key items that we need to be wary of are the names of the parties that haven't been made public, the dollar amounts, and maybe anything specific to the actual process of the sale. Can I ask you, Jeff, in regards to the anticipated future costs for improvements or demolition, etc., of the property, were they all in the data room?
I'd need to check with Ross McGuinness on that in terms of the process last year because I wasn't here.
Right, so they weren't all in the data room. And so let's also be mindful of those figures as well. So, Jeff, would you like to give us an overview and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Morning, Acting Mayor and Councillors. So can we have the first slide, which provides an overview of the options that we've outlined in this paper? The next slide. That one, great, thank you. So just to recap from last year, from March 2022, Council opened a open market tender process. In August, you endorsed negotiation with one preferred tenderer, the Eights, a private equity group from Sydney. Those negotiations ended up being very difficult and protracted. And so towards the end of the year, we gave them one last opportunity and ample time. They came back with quite unreasonable conditions. So today we're seeking a decision from Council to terminate that process. There were other tenderers, so there were 4 that were shortlisted. We had the approval from Council to engage with the one preferred tenderer. The other tenders have since lapsed, so the process is effectively at its end, but we would like a council decision today to terminate the process. So then we've come up with, in terms of next steps, 4 options for consideration today, so I'll just run through those briefly. The first option is basically the one that, in the administration's view, provides the long-term economic and social benefits. This would involve a 3-stage process. So we would run an open request for proposals with industry and community. We would then, the administration would assess those. We could then come to council and have a workshop looking through all of the proposals and the ones that are recommended by the administration. And then we would go and run a formal EOI process. So there would be optionality within this. You could go fully open to industry and community. You could have, from the community groups coming forward wanting recreational space, a park. You could have environmental groups wanting to plant 10,000 trees on the site to offset, city emissions. And then you could have, obviously, proposals from industry such as those ones that we know are current and we've highlighted in the paper. In particular ones that have come from the tourism industry perspective. And then in terms of once we'd considered the proposals, if you wanted to run an EOI, you could do that in a broader sense. So if you wanted to narrow it down to, okay, we want a major visitor economy outcome here, you could target visitor economy. You could even go narrower. You could say that we want, for example, we want a 6-star hotel, or we want student accommodation on the site, such as, for example, my recent experience the Queensland Government did with Queen's Wharf Brisbane. So, they wanted a major tourism economy outcome there. Can I just check we are enclosed? No. We're not. Right, okay. A major tourism economy outcome, and they stipulated the certain elements that they wanted from that. So then in terms of the second option, so this would be where we deal now with other parties. So as I said, we had the market process last year. We had the one preferred tenderer. Since that time, we have seen that there is some significant new interest coming forward. This might reflect, I guess, some of the very few, count on one hand, strategic large-scale development sites along the strip that are available, being transacted over the last 12 months. For example, the Vomitron site has been acquired, the Seaview site in front of Pacific Fair, and I think this might have now been identified as one of the few remaining strategic opportunities. So this would enable us to, having run a public tender, open the process and deal with other parties. So this, in terms of the final outcomes, in contrast to the first option, would enable us to provide deliver the highest cash return to the city. The third option would be running a new tender process. So This would be repeating what we did last year, recognising that there is some significant new interest coming forward. The reasons to do this over the second option, in terms of dealing with other parties, would be if we wanted greater accountability in terms of what you get from a tender process, and also if we wanted to, if there was a recognition that perhaps the market had shifted. I didn't say with option 2, there is a requirement there that we could not accept any less than the highest tender than we had received from last year. So that would create the floor for the dealing with other parties. And then we have the fourth option, which is that council decides to retain ownership of the car park. Some of the considerations there are the return that the car park delivers. So you're aware from the paper that it does break even in terms of the revenue that we get from the car park and in those few commercial ongoing tenancies that we have in the transit centre. But the big questions there, I guess, are the ongoing maintenance and liabilities. So those have been taken care of in the immediate term, but if we look at the asset life and 17 years remaining, it is possible that there are liabilities that we're not aware of now that could arise. So they are the 4 options, Chair.
Does anybody have any questions to Jeff in regards to that slide? We should be enclosed if we're dealing with anything that we think needs to be dealt with enclosed. Councillor Taylor? Yep.
Thank you, and through the chair, and hold me back if I'm going outside the premises. When you mentioned about the current facilities breaking even, the report indicates not a break even. As an operational at the moment in the current papers, it's showing a positive projection moving forward that could be investigated and get a better outcome on that return if we maintained it. Is that sounding correct?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Through the chair. So in terms of the operating for the car park, it does break even and it delivers a very modest rate of return. But what we're talking about in terms of the unknowns is the capital expenditure. So there's been significant recent capital expenditure. In prior years, there was even greater capital expenditure to address issues with the diaphragm around the transit centre basement car park. And the projection at the moment is the capital expenditure over the next 10 years is moderate, but we don't know what we don't know.
Darren. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. But in this point of time, the current structure is meeting all expectations and there's no concerns at this particular time. Any structure, you could always have a concern, but at this particular time, the current structure has met all the obligations as an operation facility.
Yes, it does. I guess it doesn't perhaps meet expectations in terms of the utilisation of the car park, which is a very well known long traversed issue here in terms of, utilisation rates are very low at Bruce Bishop, apart from, a few days of the year when you do have peaking around major events in Surfers Paradise.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, is that in regards to that topic? Yeah, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just a question on that utilisation. So you've identified, and I think we can say the percentage.
Yeah, I reckon we
So the current average monthly utilisation rate of the car park in 2022 was 37%. But you do note that it's expected to exceed supply in 2031. So would that suggest then, from now to 2031, that we would be expecting that utilisation to increase? Isn't that what that suggests?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. So back through the chair. So I think that's based on the status quo and no change. So the opportunity here, as canvassed in the paper, is that we are able to prosecute better some of the active transport strategies. The extension of the light rail should make a difference in terms of how people travel through Surfers Paradise. So we would expect over the next decade to see a change in utilisation. It wouldn't necessarily be based on what we see in the present day.
And can I just ask, Jeff, is that, so in report page 70, you do talk about the remaining public and private off-street car parking facilities having better level of occupancy and greater use of dynamic on-street paid parking pricing strategies to achieve overarching transport strategies. That's effectively where you're coming from. Yeah. So, Councillor Caldwell.
My question was just numerically, what does the 37% equate to in terms of actual vehicle numbers?
Sorry, I can't tell you in terms of vehicle numbers. I'm just going to look at Ross and see if he has that.
Does someone remember what the capacity?
So, Ross,
yeah. Okay.
and Ross, is the 37 the peak that it meets on average during the month?
Well, I think that says annual. Oh, sorry, average, doesn't it? So
it says the average monthly utilisation rate. Yeah. So, Councillor Baldwin-Lumsden.
Thanks. I had a few questions just on that. The 37%, does that mean there's 600 cars a day, or at any given time there's about 600 cars in the car park? That's what I was... I'm unsure. 3 years.
It's roughly. Or to put another way, there's roughly 800 to 900 empty spaces on average at any given point in time in the month.
But what I'm asking is that 600 cars entering, paying the $5 or whatever it is, or is that for a full day, or is that at any given time there's about 600 cars? Because that could be 2,000 cars entering a day and staying for a couple of hours.
Yeah, it could.
Because the other question, obviously, as Jeff said, was that it's needed for those peak times when there's major events and things in Surfers Paradise, that it's getting utilised. And as Councillor Taylor said, it is returning a profit at the bottom of page 70 there. Just curious, how many of our services in the city return a profit? Like, I know obviously our libraries and things don't. I thought the fact that the car parks, I saw it there in Surfers Paradise as a service so that people could go to the centre of the city. But the fact that it's returning a profit, I see is a good thing, especially when it's exceeding the 10-year capital forecast in a year and a half. I guess, yeah, the question sounded like no one actually had the answer in terms of how many cars are using it a day. It just had sounds like that's how many cars are in there at any given time.
Yep. So I've got Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Gates. Well, firstly, do we have any more questions in regards to the car parking demand? Are you still on that, Councillor Taylor, or are you going to move on? Yeah.
Obviously, the figures we've got in the report at the moment talks about current car park demand. It doesn't have a look at what the opportunity of the car park could look like if there was a study and more promotional or marketing improvement on the spacing could be. So the figures we've got in here are based solely on the current usage, not based on a potential of the current facility.
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. It's based on current usage. Yeah, I guess the paper canvasses both opportunities to encourage residents and visitors to use other parking, and as well there is the opportunity you're alluding to, Councillor, of encouraging greater utilisation of Bruce Bishop.
So, are you still on the same track?
It's about the transit centre and public transport and the discussion. So
I might just pause there, because I think I've got Councillor Young, Councillor Gates and Councillor Baldwin in regards to the occupancy.
So, and just coming back to what Councillor Taylor was saying then, I think you've got to look at it both sides. If you're saying current use and potential current use, then you've also got to factor in where you're saying it's breaking even now, but we're not factoring the future. So you can't have the pie in one hand and not in the other. So if we're going to look at current use and future use, then we've also got to look at current liability and future liability, which on page 70 indicates 5 lines there of potential current liability going forward, and that's not an exhausted list. It excludes some of the things that we've actually been provided in the past and the costs that will come back to the city and ratepayers should those things happen. So if we're considering current and future on the use of it, we've also got to consider current and future on the loss of it, on the liabilities.
So Councillor Gates?
Well, I'm just interested in Councillor Baildon Lumsden's query, to be perfectly honest, about how the percentage was arrived at. Was it on the numbers of vehicles entering each day?
Doesn't sound like it to me.
Thanks, Acting Mayor, for the
Sorry.
question.
I just don't, I'd not contemplated it from that perspective before.
Do you know that?
I don't have the granularity, sorry, with me today on how the study was conducted. So they were recently released data points around parking utilisation across the city, so we could come back with that.
So Ross, in the data room, could you just grab the microphone so people can hear your answer? So Ross, in the data room, was there accurate information in regards to the daily use? So I know that as a resident of the Gold Coast, when we drive into Surfers, we see the sign that says there's 1,000 vacant spots, but that's at a given point in time. And I suppose we're trying to reconcile that with the statement 37% on average.
So through your chair, the information in the data room was the information provided by the group within council who manage the car park. They have daily stats on movements in and out, average rate, what people are paying, etc. But in terms of how that then extrapolates to that 37%, I can't tell you exactly, whether that's just averaged over the day, whether that's the movements in and out. I can't recall that detail, but certainly that information and the granularity was provided to the bidders back 3 years, if I remember correctly, in terms of daily and monthly figures for that period.
Thank you. So Councillor Baildon Lumsden.
Thanks, Chair. Just two questions. One was, I guess, through you to the colleagues. I feel like the last report we had said that the car park was operating at a loss. I'm not sure if I'm remembering incorrectly or not. Is that correct from the last report?
I would say to you that the difference between that report and this report is that clearly on page 70, it indicates that it's operating at a profit, which I don't think that the last report indicated.
Okay, because I felt like the last one did that, so I was just wondering how we've had that change in a year or year and a half. The next question then was, has there been any change in the pricing of the car park since the last report?
So I don't think Jeff's going to answer that for us. So we as a council set our fees and charges on an annual basis as part of the rates process, and generally we've increased those at around CPI. So my best guess is that there's been a minor increase in revenue in regards to the daily rate for the Bruce Bishop car park, which we as councillors have set as part of the budget process.
Okay.
And then Ross, how did I go?
Just through your chair, I can confirm prices have increased. I can't confirm to what quantum, but I'm aware they have increased.
Because I feel like it was $5 a day, so CPI increase.
So it's more than $5 a day. So I think if you go in there, it's $11 or something like that for a day. But it is our standard. It currently is. We have a standard off-street car parking rate that is the same for all of our off-street car parks and isn't specific to Bruce Bishop. So whilst Bruce Bishop is clearly the largest asset in the off-street car parking portfolio, it is charged the same hourly and daily rate, my understanding, as Malberg, for example, which is also and then the difference to that is there are some groups that are allowed concessions as part of their parking. So Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I am very grateful for the questions and points of Councillor Baildon Lumsden today. And I was wondering if it would be possible before full council, if we could get a comparison of what was presented to us in terms of the break-even of this car park the last time we met to vote on it and now, because it does seem quite significant, the difference. Yep. Is that something we could get?
Ross?
Just to clarify, I think my recollection was the previous report indicated a trading surplus of around $400,000 per annum. So it was actually cash positive, but only marginal in terms of the asset value. So again, I'm not privy to the figures that Jeff's inserted in the report in terms of how that figure's increased. But
Yeah. Councillor Gates.
I think possibly the last report was different in a number of ways.
Yeah.
And so it places us all in quite a difficult position today. Some of us have had very strong views about this asset. And I'm one of those people who, on the basis of previous information, felt very strongly. But this is a very different report to consider. And so I don't know what the benefit is of comparing one with the other. If this is the correct information, then this is what we need to be guided by in making our decision today.
So-
that's a comment, I know it's
so
not.
in regards to answering Councillor Patterson, Jeff, can you take it upon yourself to provide to councillors between now and full council the net amount that was provided in the last report, and then that'll at least inform us. In regards to what Councillor Gates is saying, we make decisions based on the information provided at the time, and the information we provided in this report is different.
Clarify one point for the conversation. I think it probably is the capital expenditure. So previous reports had the operating. They were also highlighting some significant rectification work that was required that is now underway. So we've turned the focus, I guess, more on the operating for the future years.
And the other clear impact on revenue for a car park in the central tourism precinct of the Gold Coast is that we've also had 2 years of COVID in amongst that as well. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify, there was a period of time that we did reduce it $5 because of COVID, but it's been returned to around $10. I just want to respond to Councillor Pauline Young's in relation to page 70, and I just want a clarification of those numbers there. I don't believe today we're talking about renewing our assets or making a change to an assets. This would be the cost if we did do that type of project. My understanding is today, page 70, down the bottom.
I'm looking at the 4 lines or 5 lines worth of potential liabilities.
Previous Vice Council contemplated several options, partly fully demolished.
Through the chair.
So you're going to need your microphone on, Councillor Young. Thank you.
I'm talking about the paragraph above it where it says the current asset management plan identifies the following equipment concerns. And there's 4 lines there with
So this being
concerns.
security network systems, signage, lighting, ticketing, etc.
List of what we've been provided in the past. So I've kept lists of what we've been
So I suppose,
provided in the past.
again, we go on the information we've provided at the moment, and the asset management plan for the next 10 years indicates a not insignificant amount of capital spend, which we need to take into account. Councillor Hamill?
Mr Chair, to come to what the officer's recommendation actually is, so I just want to clarify with Jeff, because I think there's been a couple comments on the surplus and the amount of it, but the officer's position is that while it makes a marginal profit, that it would be better to look at what options may be available that could make a bigger profit out of the ratepayers' asset. Is that the crux of the recommendation?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Back through the chair. Slightly different. So if we look at the options there, so in terms of greatest profit for the city, so that would be disposal as is where is basis. So either dealing now with other parties or running a new tender process that would deliver the greatest cash return to the city. What we're talking about, the administration's recommendation was that we look at the greatest strategic use of the site with industry and community.
Yeah, which a result of that may be that we make a considerably larger return on the asset.
Maybe, maybe not, depending on the proposals that come forward. It's more about the strategic benefits that the city would accrue over a long term.
And in option 1, if we went and opened it up to a process where you could let industry come back to us for what they think could happen on the site, would it be a fair assessment that part of that could be where industry comes back and says that as part of a development we would include public car parking still?
Back through the chair. Yes, industry could suggest that. I'd just point out that car parking is generally costed for construction around $50,000 per car park. So, 100 car parks would be $5 million. And
Depending on a few of the options you've got in the report, they would be needing to have car parking anyway. So it may be that car parking, when they're not using it for their use, is available, or a section of it could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think.
So, and Chair, in the same way, so while industry could suggest that back to us, we would also be in a position to say to industry at that stage that as part of any proposal, we would like to see an element of public car parking still.
Absolutely. We could have whatever conditioning we like. The point I was making before, Councillor, was that the more conditioning there is around car parking, and this has been canvassed in previous reports, it diminishes the cash return to the city significantly.
Mr Chair, I'd say to Jeff, I think there's a difference between last time where it was a condition of sale versus through this process where it's just an open dialogue with industry.
So I'm going to step in there to say that we've been down the path a couple of times. So in 2016 and 17, we actually had a condition in regards to a minimum number of car parks that were required.
Again, Mr Chair, that was to sell the site with a condition that had to have it back. We're not suggesting it has to be a sale that includes that condition.
So I'm just saying to you that we've been down the path of a council suggesting that we needed a minimum amount, and then the most recent sale process was no conditions, and then option one that the officers are recommending is effectively to cast it out to the industry, and by saying industry they mean both the tourism industry, the property industry and any other industry, to see what may come of that process so that we then distill that information and move forward into a process. But it would be fair to say that the council over the last 10 years has already had one go at setting an amount of minimum car parking and one go of setting no amount of car parking. Option one ultimately is to ask the broad industry what it might look like, and then for council to work backwards from there.
So just to clarify the answer to the question, it's not that it couldn't happen. Just because it hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future.
That's correct.
Yep. It would, but it would allow us to have that conversation again and explore all options.
If we went down that path.
Yeah, cool.
Councillor Barlin-Lumsden.
Just following on from that, Chair, with the option one, just hopefully this is fine. So that on bottom of page 68, the time frame, I just don't, literally the last three words of page 68, what's the urgency for that kind of time frame if we went with option one?
So, Jeff, I briefly saw that you had a slide that looked like it was a timeline. Is that the next slide?
No, Chair, that was actually more historical, where we've come to from here. To answer the councillor's question back through the chair, so that would be at council's discretion if it were minded to support option one to decide the timeframes. We've just indicated what we think might be realistic in terms of a market process and the preparation for that around probity and other considerations.
Because just listening back and forth between yourself and Councillor Hamill, the like having gone down paths previously, like seems like there's been lots of paths that have gone down previously and they've all failed. So that's why I'm also like the idea of option one, but I also don't want to rush industry in terms of you've got to give us your idea in this short period of time when it might take longer than what is only really a few days to put something together. So I'd much rather, to be honest, some intermingling of option 4 and 1 sounds.
Okay, so I've got a question from Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair, I will have a change of recommendation at some point when you're prepared to take it. But one of the questions for me with the current asset and the current report we're looking at is, and we talk about buses and the transit centre and the usage of it, where it was designed for public transport. But in our vision moving forward, we're highly relying on public transport as a motor vehicle. So we're trying to get people onto light rail that's mentioned a lot. And I would presume public transport would include bus services, which down the track could foresee that we need an opportunity to house public transport as a point. So it's just a point I'm making in relation to the transit centre as maintained as an asset, and also as a public space that we actually own at the moment. Part of Surfers Paradise at the moment is green space is what we will need in the future. That has been discussed in other reports, that there's an asset here that we may have to purchase in the future. So I think this report's telling a different story to previous reports that's come to council in relation to not maintaining it. And I feel that I would like to have a change of recommendation because I think there's an opportunity to revisit the transit centre as maintaining under the city's control and improving the outcome of return and where that actually sits in the city moving forward.
Right. Councillor Gates, did you have a question?
Just about the transit centre and the use of it for buses at the moment. What's the level of use at the moment?
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Back through the chair. So it's very low. The assessment that the city administration has done indicates that we need to cater for about 2 coach services per day, which we could do through another location in the city.
Okay.
So on your original slide about the timeline, did that actually also include the time that the transit centre was actually built?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so my best guess is the transit centre was built to service Greyhound and Skinners and a generation of bus transport that has probably been replaced by the modes of transport that came after that, which is ANZ, TAA, Virgin, Jetstar and the like, which is the majority of domestic travel in Australia. So, Councillor Taylor?
Just in relation to bus services, we're talking about what buses actually stop at the transit centre. There is ongoing conversation with the buses and where they actually stop round Surfers Paradise at the moment, which is a problem which we met with the industry recently because they are parking around Surfers Paradise and trying to find spots to park. They're naturally trying to find, like we do as residents, trying to find the best spot to park. But I think it's important to understand it is a challenge out there, and I think we need to really understand where our buses are going and where they're allowed to park moving forward, because I'd hate to see a situation where we're saying it's not an impact at the moment, but it's not an impact at our present site. It could be an impact through the city, which I can say we have been meeting with the bus industry. It may not be Greyhounds coming from the airport, from interstate, but there is a lot that actually do come from private usage from the airports, Brisbane and around. So the usage of buses is still there, in my opinion. The way they're used might be a slightly different, and it's, in my view, as we grow as a city and as we continue as a destination, holiday destination, we are going to rely on public transport, and I think we just need to be mindful of that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Hamill?
Mr Chair, could Jeff give a bit more detail about what an open market engagement process looks like? And I guess in my simple view, I'm seeing it as that all options are on the table and that whatever the time frame would be, I probably agree with Ryan about Councillor Van Lum's a little bit. 6 weeks might be a little bit short, but I think less than 3 months would be an appropriate time frame to get something back. So we go to market with a short, sharp period where anybody can put forward an idea to us and have an open dialogue with us. So everything is on the table. You bring forward a proposal to us. And then on the back of that, once they've been assessed to a certain point, would all of the options that were put out there be brought back to council, or would the organisation go through and bring back a short list?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Back through the chair. So we could provide more detail around how we want to design the process, and I think that's a conversation to have with you all here and in full council. We've indicated conceptually how that would look. To answer your question, so the first stage would be more conceptual, so bring forward your ideas, and then in terms of the assessment, it would depend how many proposals that the administration received. We might seek to categorise them, in terms of if it's as broad as I outlined it potentially could be, subject to your decisions. If we had community proposals, if we had industry and by different sectors, we talked about student accommodation or, hotels. So then we might categorise them and then provide some advice and then have a workshop with councillors around how do we want to have pick a sector. Do we want to have a particular type of development, like we want a 6-star hotel? Do we want a number of different outcomes here? We've talked this morning about, do we want to have car parking included, whether private or some concessional ongoing public car parking? And then we would run a more targeted process. We would seek request for detailed proposals, which we would then assess and come back to council for decision.
Yeah. So it just puts all options on the table for this room to assess and have a look at.
That's
and
right.
doesn't commit us to anything. Just lets us look at what options could be out there from industry.
That's right.
So I've got Councillor Caldwell, and then I think I might have Councillor Patterson, and then I'm back to Councillor Taylor.
Does anyone know what the outcome of the 2008 activity was where council decided not to proceed with the tender? Do we know what the best offer was back at that point?
I'm not able to answer that question. I haven't been here long enough, sorry.
Councillor McDonald, do you recall 2008? So I reckon that would have been, was that City? No. Well,
That's right. We might be able to pull up that.
No.
What?
Dolly World? No, Dolly World. So, but I think, publicly it was known that that City Pacific had put in some type of joint venture offer. I think it just ground to a halt, Councillor Caldwell. And 2008 was maybe a time in the economic cycle which also made it grind to a halt.
Yeah. Which, again, makes it an interesting point in time where the market cycle was slightly tapering, and yet here we are also in another potential part of the cycle where the market's tapering and we're going to repeat history. But anyway, I might try and dig out that report because I would be interested to know what the best offer was in 2008/9.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I would like to just understand a bit more about what happened during the negotiations on this contract. So when the preferred tenderer, when it was looking like they weren't going to fulfil on this contract, why did we not make sure that we kind of had a deadline time frame of them where we could still consider those other options? Because I mean, for me, if I've got an offer on the table on my house and it's not looking good, and I know I've got a few others here, I'll just say, right, okay, you need to make a time from then because I'm going to chat to these people. But we missed that opportunity. So I'm just curious about that negotiation process.
So we might be really close to needing to go to close to discuss that. So. That's the short answer.
No, I agree. It didn't allow for officers to go back to others. It didn't allow them to go to others. But what happened, my understanding, or we can do it in close, is that just got off the table because of timing. So it was not even an option to bring it back or to have a discussion about it. They would have had to have come back to council to agree to another tenderer, but the timing didn't allow that. So it's kind of irrelevant now because we've moved on, but I'm just curious about that process and how that happens.
So councillors, do we have a preference of moving to close to receive an answer, or are we happy to not receive an answer at this point in time? Okay, so we're going to move to close to discuss the process around the actual contract or the tender process. So moved Councillor Patterson, seconded Councillor Taylor. All in favour? And we're in closed. and we are streaming. So we've moved back into open, having discussed some confidential matters in regards to some of the identified processes around the tender. Councillor Taylor, do you have any more questions?
No questions, just a change of recommendation when you're ready.
Yep, so we could have the recommendation. So that's the officer's recommendation. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, and I've actually forwarded it through to the minute taker, 1 to 5. And what in the, we'll get it up here first. So what I've proposed is one, deemed to be non-confidential. 2, the negotiation with the did not proceed to a conditional contract. Notes that the Chief Executive Officer terminates the tender process. So we've actually finalised the previous process. There's a point 4 here that I've actually added in, but it could fall part of our budgetary, but it's in relation to the next 10-year maintenance upgrade costs to maintain the transit centre, Bruce Bishop Car Park for the next 10 years. And number 5 also then asks the Chief Executive Officer to take and review all existing public and private off-street car parking facilities in Surfers Paradise to identify what opportunities exist to improve the levels of occupancy and greater uses of dynamic on-street, off-street parking prices, and present a report back to Council to consider in October 2024. And the idea is to ensure that we are using our asset at the most optimal level we can now. We have gone to the market twice over a period of time with no success.
Before you maybe start speaking to it, so that's your change recommendations is 1 to 5?
Yes.
Okay, if I can find somebody to second that. So Councillor McDonald, I note that you're seconding it, but or seeking to second it, and I'll allow that, and will be interested in hearing from you as after Councillor Taylor has spoken.
Thank you, and through the chair. The reason for my change of recommendation is over a long period of time we have tried to sell this asset with no success. We've tried to sell it with car park and without car park. The long-term prediction for Surfers Paradise is high density, and it's our heart of our city. And we have a piece of asset there that the community owns at the moment and is required at the moment, and will almost certainly be required in the future. We talk about public transport as the future of our city, and in my view, bus services is a public transport facility that needs to be considered on how we work. Light rail is a form, but that doesn't help anyone west of the Gold Coast Highway that needs to come into Surfers Paradise. And we still need to have the ability for parking, 1, for residents, 2, for people that work in the city as well. The other thing that's been identified in future reports is green space. The city may have to consider green space in the future and purchasing of land. So again, public transport, vehicle access and green space is all a consideration for our growing city moving forward. It is a community asset, and it's important when we consider this, there's a community consultation that is actually involved in the process. And we need to ensure that we're getting value and we're actually getting a right outcome for our assets. We've been doing this now for 10 to 15 years, going through a process of trying to sell the property. We've had some concerns which we've rectified on that journey, but I don't believe we've got value for return from an asset that's sitting here in the heart of the city. So by doing this, this gives the ability to understand what the return could be to the city if we focus on the actual venue, on the actual property, and not just focus on disposing of an asset. So I encourage, we've tried, we've had previous councillors that have constantly expressed the need for the asset in the middle of a city. We've had numerous businesses and community expressing a need for an asset in the middle of our city. And we need to ensure that we keep this asset and we get the best return from it. And like any good organisation, we review our assets on a regular basis. But we're talking Surfers Paradise, we're talking the centre of our city, we're talking a major asset that people around the world and Australia are paying big amounts of money for assets on this along the strip, and it's going to become rarer and rarer. So I hope that we can get support to keep the asset and look at what better outcomes we can get for this site.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Would anybody like to speak against the recommendation? Yep, Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, through you to Councillor Taylor, is there a reason why we can't have what the officers have recommended but also get the work you're looking to be done, so we're assessing all options? Because to me, what you're looking for in number 5, in terms of a review to be done on the car parking situation and are we getting the return out of it we could, and ongoing utilisation numbers and whatnot in the future, is just one of several options that should be considered at the same time, possibly?
My opinion is we need to keep the asset. It's needed for the city for the long term. That's the first discussion. Do we need it? And that's been the reason we've had the previous conversations previously. The challenge that we've never had, what we've never seen, and I've never seen in the report, is actually understand what we can actually get as a return from the assets we've got. And then that way we can maintain an asset that we've got. Previous reports have always indicated that we cannot afford to keep the asset, or there's been challenges for it. That applies to any asset. I believe this just gives us the ability to really look at the asset we've got and understand what this asset means to the city moving forward, and make sure that we're getting the right return of the asset we've got right now.
Would anybody like to speak against the amended motion? Councillor Barlin, you want to speak against it, or would you like to?
I had a question to the mover, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Just for point 4, point 4. My question is those costs. It says maintenance and upgrade. Do any of those works actually improve the utilisation or the service to the residents in terms of the car park, or are they just, for the most part, maintenance works that would be undertaken over the 10-year projected timeline as required?
Okay, so Councillor Taylor, rather than you answer that, I might ask an officer to answer that. So, Ross?
Through you, Mr Chair, I could say with some certainty those are just costs to maintain the asset in its current state.
Okay, which, I guess the question, where it's in the motion says to come from the strategic priority reserve, those are works that would be undertaken as required anyway if the asset was held on to, and it wouldn't come from that budget pool, would it? No. Okay.
Councillor Caldwell.
I just had a question, just in terms of the correctness of point 2. In the recommendation from the officers, it says that it did not proceed to an unconditional contract. And in this, it says conditional contract. I don't know if that's just an error. Yeah. And it should reflect.
So, can I ask, through you to Ross, did the council recommendation in regards to the successful tenderer require it to be an unconditional contract?
I don't recall it did, but through you, Mr Chair, I suspect the correct wording should just be contract. We didn't actually have a contract executed.
Yeah.
So we could remove the word conditional. So, Councillor Caldwell, my view was that the last recommendation actually was probably silent in regards to whether or not it needed to be either conditional or unconditional. It just never arrived.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that recommendation or that resolution. I don't think it says anything. So anyway, I think that's better.
Yep, thank you.
And then my 2 cents worth, which I've already shared with Councillor Taylor before the meeting, is that I don't feel like we should be paying for car park maintenance, which is standard business practice over the next 10 years out of the strategic priority reserve. I don't know whether we need to identify it as a separate resolution, because we would do it anyway as part of general maintenance, but I certainly don't think it should come from strategic priority reserve. So I'm not on the committee, but my suggestion would be that we come up with some alternative wording that suggests that those works be funded from the usual maintenance program identified in the city's annual budget.
So if the words "be funded from the strategic priority reserve" were removed, Councillor Caldwell?
That's just my personal view, and so I'm only giving that as in an effort to try and come up with a collaborative approach to decision making. Because I just don't think that's the right place for it to come from. But it's a matter for the committee to make a recommendation.
So Councillor Taylor, if the words "be funded from the strategic priority reserve" would be removed, I think it's important to indicate the cost of the asset management over the next 10 years. So we have discussed in open today the fact that the property does net income, but what the city doesn't do at the moment is we don't ring fence the income and keep it to a particular area. But I think that if we're making a decision in regards to the asset returning money, we should also be mindful of the expense required over the next 10 years in regards to the asset management. So I've got Councillor, and I'm assuming we've got ongoing questions. Okay.
Mr Chair, a question for you to Councillor Taylor, and it's to propose an amendment to his amendment to see if he's open to it. So you've probably detected that I've got an interest in the open market process, in finding out what options may be there, but I also have an interest in finding out the answers to the question Councillor Taylor asks in regards to the public car parking supply and what they might actually look like. So I'm wondering if he'd be open to the idea of we keep his amendment that adds in the car parking studies and those pieces of work, and his number 4 about the maintenance and upgrade work being done and funded. But if he'd be prepared to add in number 4 from the officer's recommendation, just with a deletion of the last part of it. So if you go down to number 4, so I'd be looking to add in number 4, but just delete from after property. And then that would be a new number 6, or whatever the number sequence needs to be, which, Mr Chair, just to explain quickly before you go to Councillor Taylor, in my eyes would mean that all councillors get the opportunity to see all the available information, including what comes out of the open market engagement process, which may be nothing, but may be something. But we also get the information that Councillor Taylor is looking for in terms of the parking study being done. Is he open to that?
So I may be taking that as an amendment shortly. So can we not add it as 6, because it's not the recommendation at the moment of Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor McDonald. In fact,
it was to see if he'd be prepared to add that to his amendment. Yep. Otherwise, I'll foreshadow it afterwards.
So you would move an amendment, or would seek to move an amendment?
If he's not interested in adding it to his proposal.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Taylor first to answer whether or not you are prepared to, or you would be happy with that, and then I'll ask Councillor McDonald, and then we'll go from there.
I appreciate your comments and understand the reasoning why you're considering it, but it's not what I believe that we need for that particular land to keep in our assets at the moment, and we need to understand the body of work, because the asset is an important part of the city, and the bit of work that we've never done is underpin what the asset can return, because we need to try and maintain that asset forever.
Okay, so I think that probably answers your comment, Councillor Hamill. So are you interested in moving an amendment to add the 6, and then we'll deal with that? Yep, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't be supporting the change amendment, and I just wanted to explain why. And I suppose this is...
So, Councillor Patterson, I suppose we don't need to speak against an amendment that hasn't been moved
I know,
yet.
I appreciate that, but it's also something that I wanted to communicate to the Chief Investment Officer in context of this and other things that are coming from the new Chief Investment Officer office. On page 72, we are given the reason for this is because of the alignment with the council plan, the element of the council plan relating to the diverse, thriving economy. And through you, Chair, if I may, to Jeff, is to say that I will find it very difficult to support or focus on projects that are presented from the Investment Office if it is solely on that one element of the council plan. What I would prefer to see, rather than something which is that amendment which focuses solely on that, also reflects the other objectives of the council plan: vibrant lifestyle, connected community, naturally unique, livable places, one city. So I feel that we have a bit of a concern if we go down a tunnel of, okay, this is brilliant from an economic perspective, but we kind of are forgetting what we're here for in terms of those broader elements. Anytime I see that the project and the presentation is diverse, thriving economy without those other elements considered, that's going to cause a concern. What would be greater is if we're going to do an analysis, let's do it with all those elements of the council plan considering. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. So I'm going to say that where we're at the moment is Councillor Taylor has moved a change recommendation. Councillor Hamill had suggested that he may seek to do an amendment. I'm going to ask you, Councillor Hamill, are you interested in doing an amendment?
No, Mr. Chair. I'll let this come back if it gets successful, but would think that if, depending on what this report brings back in the future, if it isn't showing a very strong story, then the words that are in the officer recommendation would be getting added on in a later stage.
Okay, so Councillor Caldwell.
So just another sort of technical question. Through you, perhaps to Jeff or to someone else, maybe Nikki, if she's listening still. She's not. She's busy talking to the chief, whatever he is.
Sorry, Nikki.
Do we require a specific resolution that says that council not proceed with the sale? Because I think the difference with what Councillor Taylor is trying to achieve is we're not selling this thing, and we want to, for the first time in the last 15 years, try and make it work as effectively as possible as a city asset, to make sure it's functioning as a car park and to make sure it's functioning with whatever commercial activation we bring in. So I personally don't want to see this bubble up again in 6 months' time because someone's been doing some secret project behind the scenes to re-prepare it to launch it back into the marketplace, for example. So would it be cleaner and easier for the officers if there was a paragraph that said that council not proceed with the sale? That's the first question.
So do you think that that's what 3 does, though? So
Sorry?
So 3 terminates the current process.
Yeah, I just want to make this crystal clear because, for example, yesterday we were hearing about green bridges and now there's some sort of business cases about green bridges. Even though we had stopped the budget allocation, thinking that might be enough, previous resolutions bubble around and there's one action from our resolution from 5 years ago that leads to a body of work being done and all of a sudden the thing's being sold again. So I just want to know, should we add that we're not selling it? And are there any other resolutions that are outstanding? This was going to be a second question. But are there any other actions that are outstanding from previous resolutions that would lead to a body of work to create a sale environment?
Okay. So Jeff.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Back through the chair. So the resolution that we were seeking, as you've alluded to, is just simply to terminate the process that was commenced in March 2022. The direction that I'm hearing is that we would then be instructed to do a body of work looking at transport through Surfers Paradise, public and private car parking and transport opportunities to increase utilisation and revenue from the asset.
Okay. I'm just always worried that we walk out of this room and then what's in writing isn't then remembered in 2 years or 5 years or post Jeff or post Cameron or post whoever else, you know what I mean? So as far as possible, I always prefer that the resolutions are complete. So that's fine. Because the difference is we have over the last 5 years let the asset get to a point where it probably was almost vacant possession for someone to have a clear crack at a development, whereas if we know we're going to hold it, that's the environment that we create for us to invest in it and to try and make it work.
Okay. So are you happy you've had that answered, Councillor Caldwell? So Councillor Gates, I'm going to go to Councillor Young.
Sorry, is Jeff's answer complete?
It is. I think it's council's call
Yeah,
in terms of the direction you want to give the administration on this.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, Councillor Young.
And thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I won't be supporting the change recommendation today. I believe that the option to go to the open market to see actually what could possibly be done in this space, as the current councillor for that area has indicated, as others, we've been through this process over and over again with us calling for what we think it should be. So I think going to an open process to see what its greatest strategic value, not just to the council but to all the residents of the Gold Coast. I acknowledge that Councillor Taylor is speaking very passionately on behalf of his residents, but in this room we represent the residents of the whole of the city. So I actually believe that we need to actually go out to market and not for the sale of the purpose. If you want to take out that last in number 4 there, take out that future procurement process, that's fine, but I actually think it's incumbent upon us to see what the best strategic use of a site of this size in the centre of the city, when we know that in the past the use of that site is decreasing all the time, and then on the other side of things, and it's not to do with marketing, that it's to do at the position within the city, and then also to talk to Councillor, or just to come back to Councillor Taylor with the idea with providing a private company, which is our bus companies, space to park in the centre of service at the expense of the ratepayers is not something I could support either. So currently I am looking at the recommendation that has been put forward by the officers, and that's what I will be supporting today, so I won't be supporting the change recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Gates.
I'm totally confused and torn, to be perfectly honest. I'm worried about a number of aspects of what's before us, and I want to support Councillor Taylor in getting some information about the off-street parking and projections for off-street parking into the future, because I don't think we should be making the decision based purely on the percentage that's been provided to us within this report. I think we do need some greater detail around the numbers of vehicles going in and out each day and what the projected population of Surfers Paradise is and what might be necessary in terms of parking, because every big city has a big car park in the centre of it. The other thing that's worrying me is the number 4 in the changed recommendation on the screen, because the amount mentioned, my understanding within the report is that that was a suggested activity over 10 years. So why we would jump in and do all of that now, I would question.
So it actually needs to be completed to having removed the strategic priority reserve as source of funding. It would need some additional words to suggest that be funded over the next 10 years.
Okay, so I can't support it in its current form. The only other thing that I would like to say is that if we're going to consider this again at the conclusion of the parking report, then why wouldn't we have the open tender process as well and consider the whole lot and deal with it once and for all? Because at this point in time, it's another delay it's simply another delay rather than saying we want to cover all bases. We're not committed to selling. Quite clearly today, there's not an overwhelming desire to sell that asset in this room today, from what I can gather from the comments that have been made. I think more information is always valuable rather than less, and I'd be happy to have seen another amendment that included that option for not to take out those words to inform a future procurement process. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But yes, we could have suggestions about the future use, and we might find an appetite for some of them, and we might not. I'm certain we won't find an appetite to put 10,000 trees on one of our most valuable assets in the city. I mean, it's ludicrous to even think that that might be the outcome that we hold for that parcel of land, that 18,000 square metres of land right in the centre of Surfers. So I guess I'm in debate, and I shouldn't be, but I personally feel that we should be examining everything one more time and making our decision before moving on. So,
So I suppose yes, we are in debate, but clearly there's 2 councillors that are potentially interested in an amendment and one that is not interested in the change recommendation. So
I would be happy to move that amendment.
If the amendment was that the Chief Executive Officer undertake an open market engagement process to assist in determining the most advantaged strategic use of the property.
Well, I would rather it say that the Chief Executive Officer undertake an open market engagement process for Council's consideration. That's what I would like to see. And I would like to see that presented at the same time as the parking study. No?
It's up to you. I'm not personally interested in it.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor McDonald.
Mr Chair, could I just ask, would that be an amendment or a foreshadow? Because it's a change from not selling to opening it up.
This said that we finished the last process.
Well, I think we'll add those words then. If there is that level of uncertainty, then we should add those words.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Let's start with the easy stuff first, which is the amending the 4 to suggest that the future costs required for the completion of the 3.4 in maintenance and upgrades be funded over the next 10 years. councillors, I think that removes the uncertainty in regards to the timing of the required works as identified in the report. It sets it out over 10 years. It doesn't actually give it a source of funds, which is what the Strategic Priority Reserve does, but we know from the report that there's net income from the property, so it would be imagined that those works would be done to try to maximise the revenue that could be received from that property, right? So I think that by adding those words, we resolve the 4. And now, if we're in the world of amendments, we're going to go down 2 parts. One is to talk about going to some type of open expression and then to have that come back to council at a future date. And then the alternative is to draw a line in the sand in regards to a future tender process for sale. Would we agree that that's where we're at the moment? 2 separate paths? Yeah, councillor Ball.
For the sake of clarity, could we add to 3, if the mover was so minded, to say, and council not proceed with the sale at this time? And that way we are crystal clear that the options are we either finish the process and we're not selling, or the alternative, which may be the amendment or an alternative motion, is that a sale is still on the table through this open market process. And that way it's crystal clear for everyone to understand. But it's up to the mover.
So, Councillor Ballin-Mossy, I'm going to ask Councillor Taylor to respond to that first.
I'm comfortable with the amendments.
Councillor McDonald? Right, Councillor Barlin-Lumsden.
Thanks, Joe. Just wanted to chip in there that I'm agree with Councillor Taylor that we should not sell the asset, and I want the wording to be very clear that we don't sell the asset, because coming from the last report or the report before that, but asked why has this come forward now, and the suggestion was it just seemed like a good time to bring forward the report, and I don't want those kind of reports to just bubble up where we start suggesting the sale of the Bruce Bishop site again. I see it as a really important site to the city, but by the same token, in its current state, I don't see that as the best long-term future strategic use for the site either. I would have been keen to see what comes about from open market engagement, not for the sake of sale. I would not want to. But that can include things like PPP and those kind of things. Like, there's a lot that could come about from it. Because if we sell the site, it's just going to become another residential tower in Surfers Paradise, and there's no public car parks. There's no broader benefit.
You'd have to change the wording.
Okay, so Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, would you like me to move the foreshadowed motion with these other additions so that we've got 2 clear separate motions?
Yep.
Okay, so...
And I will accept that.
Yep.
But first, let's resolve where we're at regarding Councillor Taylor's proposed change recommendation, so which will be alternate 1, and then let's look at alternate 2 from there. So is everybody happy with where we sit in regards to Councillor Taylor's change recommendation? And no further improvements to the wording? Right, okay, thank you. So, a foreshadowed.
Yep, so foreshadowed motion, Mr Chair, which is the original officer's recommendation with some amendments. Reading the room, I'm happy to keep the amendment that Councillor Caldwell just suggested.
Okay, so if we just slow down to allow for our secretary to catch up.
Yep.
So we're going to start with the core of the original officer's recommendation.
Yep.
And then we're most likely going to add some elements of Councillor Taylor's, and then we'll add, supplement that in due course.
Correct, Mr Chair. So
Councillor Barlin-Lumsden, I'm just going to have Councillor Hamill finish, and then I'll come back to you.
So I'm happy to add the exact same words that Councillor Caldwell just added to Councillor Taylor's number 3. And then we're going, sorry, we'll get that right first.
So, and we just go back up to 2, we're going to delete the word unconditional and say 2A contract. Yes?
Yep. Yes, please. And then the final wording we got to in regards, if we just slide back up to Councillor Taylor's one, so his one that was added in about the budget side of things. So if we've got that wording correct, I'm happy to copy that down into the officer recommendation.
As a new 4?
As a new 4, if that makes sense in terms of numbering.
So 4 may still come back, so don't delete 4.
Yeah, no, don't delete
the
it.
officer's recommendation of 4, if we could insert between 3 and 4.
And then, yep. And then I'd like to slide back up. So back to Councillor Taylor's again. So the section about looking at car parking and private off-street parking and what that looks like. I'm happy to take that in because I think what I'm hearing from the room is, from some councillors, is that we would like to look at all the available information, and that is an important part of the information we should be taking into account.
So that's the easy stuff, Councillor Hamill. Where do you go next?
So the final part, Mr Chair, was Councillor Gates had a change, I think, that she suggested in regards to council consideration. Councillor Gates, where was that?
That Chief Executive Officer undertake an open market engagement process for council's consideration.
Yes, because we were going to delete, and then we're going to get rid of that last part, aren't we?
Yep.
Yep, that's fine. I think we can delete the list, Councillor Gates. Still achieves the same outcome.
Yep.
Yep.
So can I ask you, Councillor Hamill, in regards to that, are you imagining that the open market engagement process is limited to anything or unlimited? Does it involve the disposal of the property? Does it involve the disposal of a lease interest? Is it, what do you see that as being?
For this, and I guess since it's my motion, I'm in that process happy for all options to be on the table. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Gates?
Could I just ask, what would be the cost of, and is that sufficient guidance to go to an open market engagement process? I mean, there's no time frame. What sort of cost would be involved? And how would you manage it on the basis of that proposed amendment?
Chair, are you happy for me to answer that? Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Acting Mayor, for the question. I'd imagine it would be in the vicinity of, a few $100,000. I think in terms of that drafting there, we probably would need a report back time frame, as you were indicating earlier, Acting Mayor. So we've got that as October 2024 for the transport and parking study, and you talked about both report backs happening at the same time, so that the information could be considered in tandem. So that might be an addition to consider.
So that was going to be I wanted to check that my reading of that would now be that I'm not interested in reports coming back at separate times. If October 2024 was Councillor Taylor's proposed time frame, I'm happy for that to be the time frame on the rest of it as well.
So I'm interested in your foreshadowed motion being as complete as you would like it to be before we go back into debate regarding Councillor Taylor's and Councillor Barwin-Lumsden. I'm sure we'll get to you in a moment, but we'll just deal with Councillor Hamill.
Through you to the CIO, Mr Chair, do you need additional wording to say that they come back at the same time, or do we take that as the understanding of that, or do you need me to change the wording so that reflects that the parking study and the open market process are to come back to us at the same time?
I think it goes to your intention, what you would like. So as we've indicated in our paper, so we could run that open market process in a much shorter time frame. But if you'd like it in a longer time frame and the information comes back together, then we could insert that draft in. It does mean that we wouldn't, if we're talking about October 2024, we wouldn't be opening an open market process soon, because then you would be getting ideas that would no longer be current when we presented it back to council.
Are we there, Councillor Hamill?
I'm happy to leave it there.
Right, Councillor Barwin-Lumsden, then Councillor Patterson.
Chair, the question was wanted to ask before was for the open market process, because on page 72, the funding and stuff, it doesn't talk of any cost, even though that being the recommendation, there's obviously costs involved. Was that the figure I heard before, or wasn't? The cost of an open market process is?
So we haven't got an exact cost at this point, but something like this, depending on how extensive it would be, could be a few $100,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other part I had concern about, I was trying to suggest before when Councillor Hamill's word crafting, I think it was point 6, was joining 4 and 5 together so that it says that the open market engagement is to assist in determining the most advantageous strategic use of the site or the property. I was keen to stop it at property, which I think he had suggested the first time, and then saying reporting back to council for consideration. So I wanted to say that it's, as I said before, I'm not supportive of sale of the site, so I don't see sale of the site as the most advantageous strategic use for the site. So having that wording in there I think is important. I understand it's Councillor Hamill's motion. He said he wanted it completely open to any and all, but I like that the wording was in there saying that it's for the most advantageous strategic use, not the most cash-effective return for the city.
Okay, so I think in regards to the foreshadowed motion, we'll leave it as it sits at the moment. Should it come back, because the amended recommendation proposed by Councillor Taylor be unsuccessful, we'll workshop that. Is that okay with you, Councillor Baldwin-Lumsden? Yes. Yep, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just that same thing. So just from a process perspective, we would workshop it afterwards. So I'll just leave it there.
And Councillor Pauline Young's left the room, so we might just, Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, if you're open to it now, to me, the suggested adding those words back in doesn't actually make much of a difference, in my opinion. But if it was going to be enough for Councillor Baldwin-Lumsden to be comfortable with it, I'd be happy to have those words in, because I don't think it changes the overall intent that much.
In regards to your foreshadowed.
Yep.
Right. So I think that we should return to Councillor Taylor's proposed recommendation. And Councillor Taylor, I appreciate that you've opened. I think that I asked for anybody who wants to speak against it, and half an hour later, I think that we're now maybe at somebody to speak for it. Councillor Pauline Young, if you don't mind, I'm going to take your earlier comments as speaking against Councillor Taylor's. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I certainly don't support disposing of a valuable asset, especially in the middle of Surfers Paradise. Once we dispose of it, you never get it back again. And we're not taking into account the other car parks, and this motion certainly covers that. I'd just like to point out too that all council facilities in this city, whether it be the administration area, whether it be our parks, our libraries, our other car parks, it all costs to maintain and to upgrade and do whatever else we do with it. So it's no different to any of our other facilities in this city. And this resolution, I believe that Councillor Taylor has put up today, and that's why I've decided to second it. I think it covers all of those, and it also covers the issue of my concern about selling a very, very valuable asset in the middle of this city. And like I said, once you get rid of it, you never get it back again.
Anybody wanting to speak against Councillor Taylor's change recommendation? Okay, would anybody like to speak for Councillor Taylor's change recommendation? Councillor Caldwell.
Yeah, thanks. If I can, sorry, I'm not part of the committee, but
you are welcome to contribute.
Look, I am quite satisfied that over the last 15 years we have made multiple efforts with different approaches to try and work out a way to dispose of this asset. So far, none of it has worked. I think the time has come for us to actually bed down this asset as one that we recognise that we need and that we should invest in, and see it come to its best use for the community as a car park, and with supporting commercial and other activities around it. I'm even more satisfied in supporting Councillor Taylor's motion, because the foreshadowed motion, in my assessment, provides a great deal of uncertainty around what that might mean, because I don't understand whether it means a sale is potentially on the table or not. I don't understand whether it means that we have to wait till October 2024 to find that out or not. So I think it's up to us as councillors to make the decision, and we've had ample opportunity to consider multiple approaches to how we do this, and the time's come for us to recognise that the asset should stay in our portfolio. Much is made of the low occupancy figure of, you know, in arguments to sell, that it has 37% occupancy type numbers or whatever it might be. That at least equates to 600 vehicles that, if the car park was closed following a sale tomorrow, would be displaced from their usual place of parking, which I think is a problem. It may be the case that it has low occupancy, but the asset was constructed many decades ago to a far higher standard than probably what was ever foreshadowed to be required, but nonetheless we are getting, I think, good public benefit out of it in its current form. As Councillor McDonald has said, we have only got one opportunity to ever sell this asset. A number of years ago, I was persuaded that the funding from this sale would be used for other projects throughout the city. All of those other projects have been delivered throughout the city, and we have still maintained this asset. We've now found out a number of years later that this actually is a cash flow positive asset, with nowhere near the forecast capital works required as what some of us may have been led to believe was the case, which I think strengthens my resolve in making sure that we keep it within our portfolio, because the public benefit, in my view, is served by keeping it in its current form and then trying to enhance it in its public use, knowing that we will keep it in our portfolio for the foreseeable future. So whilst I can't vote today, I am supportive of Councillor Taylor's motion and will do so at full council. I think it's time for us to state publicly that we're not going to proceed with a sale, and that we should do our very best and let the organisation do their very best to get this asset working as best it can for the city.
Thank you. Councillor Gates.
Thank you. I just wanted to explain my position in seeking to support the foreshadowed motion. What's before us today, for me, didn't discount in October 24 the matter being entirely reconsidered again. So I think before we consider the parking study, or at the same time, it's valid to consider other options that might exist as well. And it's because there's been such a difference in the reports before us over the past however many years. Like, I've been adamant about the best course of action being the sale of this asset based on previous information that I've absorbed. And I don't feel that way at all today. I don't feel that on the basis of the report before us, we should be selling the asset. But I also don't think we should be just closing our mind to other options that might exist. And just because it says in this recommendation that council not proceed with the sale at this time, that doesn't mean we're not going to consider the sale into the future when we have a look at the next report that comes back. So I I just think the discrepancies in the reports that we've received have caused pause for many of us today. The occupancy and the profit that we're looking at today, they're real considerations, and it's valid that we know about the future population of Surfers Paradise and if our most valuable asset. I do agree with Councillor Caldwell too that another reason for the previous decisions was the need to fund other capital projects in the city which have been completed. So we've got a healthy bank balance. That's not a consideration at the moment in terms of this asset. It's whether the capital investment necessary for this site is what's before us today or whether it's what we were advised previously. I just think it would be an interesting situation to now have all of the information before us so that we make a decision finally, like how many years later, on whether the asset should be kept or sold, or whatever other use is proposed.
Thank you. So I'm going to have a crack at speaking for Councillor Taylor's motion, and in particular, I'm going to say that over the last 11 years, this has popped up several times for several different reasons, and I think that the proposed change to the recommendation certainly concludes the process that we last undertook, but I think it also commits the city to doing the maintenance and upgrades that are required to the existing asset. And more importantly, I think like most councillors, we're probably a bit frustrated to drive into Surfers and see the 1,000 car spaces and wonder whether or not that asset needs to be worked just a little bit harder. So I see the 5 as being actually the answer to the future, and in particular pricing. So I've made comment offline to the CEO in regards to the city's invested the city and the state and the federal government has invested quite literally billions of dollars in creating a light rail network that threads from Helensvale down to Broadbeach, and that does change the way that people should move around the city, and in particular, the fact that you can drive into the middle of the city and park for potentially less than it costs to do a return trip on the light rail is a fundamental issue that I think that we also need to address. But we can't do that in isolation. We need to do that by understanding what the available on-street parking is and what the occupancy there is and what the pricing of that looks like. I think that we've all experienced the joy of driving into the centre of Brisbane and taking out a second mortgage to pay for a couple of hours of car parking there. So I think that there's some elasticity in that pricing that has never really been explored. And having been the mover of at least 2 motions in regards to Bruce Bishop Car Park over the last 5 years, one in regards to identifying the need to provide a certain minimum level of parking in Surfers Paradise, and one also where we attempted to not have any conditions. I'm clearly not afraid to make those decisions if they need to be made, but I think in regards to today's best decision is to conclude the process, improve the asset, and see what comes out of the CEO's report or the administration's report in October 2024. And I'll conclude by saying that I've also never gone to a local government election promising to make a sale or some type of transformation in regards to the centre of Surfers Paradise, and I don't think anybody in this room's been in that position, and it is an asset that we clearly need to be very mindful of how we manage in the future. Councillor Taylor, would you like to close?
Thank you. Through the chair, this asset that we're talking about is in the centre of Surfers Paradise. I've had mentioned it many times. Why are we talking about selling a public asset over these 10, 20 years? surplus to our needs, I've heard, in a growing city, pay for other projects that I've heard. It's costing us money. Today's report is telling us that the asset is making money. We all know the city is growing, and since COVID, I think we've even gone to another level. And the city, and I'm going to keep saying, the city and the heart of our city is growing. As in relation to, as a local representative, I am, but I'm representing the city. A lot of people on the Gold Coast want to come to Surfers Paradise, and many of the emails or conversations I have are from people that are actually outside my division that want to come into Surfers Paradise. We all have a stake in Surfers Paradise, and it's an asset to our city. We all own it. I'm going to keep reinforcing it's in the heart of our city. It's once in a lifetime opportunity to keep a prime piece of land that the city needs now and will need more moving forward. So I'm hoping I can get support of everyone today to support the motion.
And because the day hasn't finished, I'm going to call a division and let's see how we go from there. So councillors will call a division, but I might just invite Alicia back up to do all of that for us. Jeff, thanks for that report. I really appreciated it. Okay, councillors, 4.
Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Bowden Lumsden, Councillor Taylor and Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor Hemmel, Councillor Gates, Councillor Pauline Young.
Thank you. Councillors, is there any general business that we would like to deal with today? Councillors, there was a presentation or some words that I would like to have shared with Sandy Rice in regards to Sandy Rice's involvement in the city. She had to leave because of the extended play version that we have had in regards to that last item. So, Alicia, if you could maybe speak to the Mayor's office and we might be able to do something at full council acknowledging her 39 years with the City of Gold Coast.
Through you, Mr Chair, Sandy's retiring and it's her last day today, but she has just had to go to her own morning tea, so she couldn't be late for that. So she did thank everyone then. She said she's probably glad because she would have cried. So,
well,
look,
so maybe if you have a chat and we might be able to make a cry at full council.
yeah, absolutely.
Rightio, councillors, 11:05. I'll pull up stumps there. Thank you for your attendance and your spirited bidding.